Good morning, biology students. It's Mr. Olson. Welcome back from spring break. Today is day 17 of our distance learning, day 16, day 17. It's week 4 essentially. And I kind of had some time to reflect over spring break about kind of how we've been approaching things. And I think overall it's worked really well. But I do think there's a need to try and simplify things a little bit. Okay. Um, as I look back at our stream on our main page here, you'll notice there's a lot of information on here, and I think it can get pretty cluttered pretty quick. And so, in an effort to simplify, what I'm doing is I'm going to be posting or trying to post one video a week, okay, at the beginning of the week, kind of laying out your learning for the week, and then having all of your assignments rolled into a one sort of packet, okay? And you'll see that your assignment today looks something like this, right? And so it says, complete the packet electronically and submit it on Google Classroom. Put your answers in red. Please put your answers in red. That way I can pick them out when I look over these, okay? This is due Friday the 17th. Your quiz over classification will be open Thursday and Friday for you to complete, okay? So all you have to do, and remember, don't turn in until at the end, and please, this is the button you need to click, not share, okay? So as we look at your packet, what sort of information are we talking about with taxonomy here? Okay, we've spent some time talking about evolution. Really, how did we get the diversity of life we have on this planet? The next thing we need to talk about is how do we classify and group and organize all those living things? And that's what we're talking about in this unit. Okay, now you had some exposure to this um, when you started working on your phylogenetic trees, and you'll notice that's part of what your lesson is on this week, okay? But the theme is how do we group things? How do we classify things in biology, okay? And so as you look through the slides, and I'll post these again just so they're easy to find, okay? There are 13 billion known species of organisms, and that's only 5% of all that's ever lived, okay? We're still finding things every week, every month, every year, new organisms are being found, okay? Some of the most important things to look at here, why do we classify things? How do we classify things? We naturally just love order. It'd be tough to go find, toothpaste at Walmart if they didn't put it with like items, right? If they put the toothpaste next to the books, that'd be really difficult to find, obviously, right? And so we do have sort of a naming system. It's called binomial nomenclature. It's this two-name system, okay? And we always have the genus name and the species name, okay? And when you write them, if you are going to be handwriting it, you need to underline the genus and species name. If you're typing it, you do it in italics, okay? And so you always capitalize the first letter on your genus name, but not on your species name. Okay, so make sure that you do that properly in your project on your long-term project. That will end up being our final project. Your organism project you've been working on. That will be our final project in biology. I'll give you more details later on that. But right now, just make sure you understand how to write a scientific name. Um, why do we name things? Why do we have some sort of common naming system? Really, there's three benefits. It creates uniformity, okay? It prevents misnomers, right? What's a misnomer? It's like a misconception based on something, okay? Like a starfish and a jellyfish, those aren't even fish, but that's what we call them. They have a scientific name to help you make sure that you don't give them a misnomer. You might think that a jellyfish is actually a fish when it's not, okay? And it uses universal language. Science is a universal language. This little cartoon kind of shows that. If we're all calling it something else, it's really hard to communicate scientific information. And so we tend to give things a scientific name. That way we're all talking about the same thing. And it just kind of minimizes those barriers. Okay. The guy that first kind of created this was Carl Linnaeus. Linnaeus was the first guy to develop this two-name system, published his information in Systema Nature. Um, it's a really famous book, but he developed that two-name system, okay? And this kind of walks you through, right? You always have the genus and species name, okay? Italicized when typed, underlined when handwritten. For us, Homo sapien, if we were to type it, you'd capitalize the H on homo, but not the S on sapien. And again, it's in italics. If we were to handwrite it, same thing, capitalize the H, but not the S, but you would underline it here, Okay. And so, really, you can tell a lot about a scientific name. Oftentimes, you can tell who it's closely related to. You have, the panda, the polar bear, and the grizzly bear. Which two are most closely related? It'd be the polar bear and the grizzly bear. Why? They both share the same genus name, Ursus, right? And then they vary in their species name, but they share a genus name, so they're very closely related. Panda bears or pandas um, aren't very closely related. They're actually more related to other living things than they are to bears, actually. So um, you can tell a lot by a scientific name and to who it's related to. Okay. Um, one thing to note is when you classify things in different groupings, you get more specific as you go down. We have domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, right? If you talk about the kingdom Animalia, well, a sea star or a starfish and a black bear are both animals, but obviously they don't share a lot in common. Okay. As you get more specific, phylum Chordata, things with a spinal cord, notice our starfish aren't on there anymore. And you keep walking down, getting more specific until you get to species, which is the most specific you can get. And so in general, we say um, your domain and kingdom name are more general, and your species name is more specific. Okay. The more names you share in common with another living thing, the more related you are. All right. So if we look here, you can kind of see those as you look at a person, a box elder tree, a bobcat, and a Canadian lynx. You'll notice that a person, a bobcat, and a lynx all have the same kingdom name, same phylum name. Notice that a tree doesn't share any of those. So obviously, trees are less related than any of these other things on here. Mammals, primates for humans, and then carnivores for bobcats and lynx. Felines, they're both in the lynx genus, and then they vary a little bit in their species name. So bobcats and lynx are more related than they are to trees or men, but humans are more related to bobcats and lynx than trees are. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. We move further down the line. I'm going to skip over some of this stuff. It's just not necessary right now. That's a little bit on taxonomy. That is the first part of your assignment. If we click over to that and look at your assignment, you'll notice it says, what is taxonomy? Who developed it, right? These are coming right out of your notes. What is the naming system, right? What rules are there, okay? So on and so forth. And so this first part, these first 8 questions or so, 9 questions come right out of your notes. And then we get to cladograms. And a cladogram, we've seen these before. It's kind of like a phylogenetic tree, but it includes also some of the derived characteristics or the speciation things that make them different. Okay, what sort of new evolutionary adaptation makes them different from each other? Okay, and so you'll read through this and you'll answer questions about these. And in general, what we say is the closer your branches are together, the more related you are. Okay, so we would say that tuna are more related to salamanders than they are to um, lancelets or something like that. Or leopards are more related to turtles than they are to lampreys. Okay, they share more of these characteristics in common. Okay, and so make sure you read through this. That'll be helpful in trying to understand these cladograms. You'll have some questions to answer on those. I've also included that. There's another cladogram. I've also included that in the notes, so you can take a peek at your notes and look at cladograms as well. Okay, and so there's those trees that we talked about. Here's the same cladogram here, and so as you look at this, what separates hagfish from perch? Well, it's the evolution of the jaw, right? Anything before this does not have this characteristic. So as you look at like claws or nails, anything before this event, this derived characteristic, is not going to have it. So salamanders, fish, and hagfish don't have claws or nails. And so everything after this should retain that characteristic. Notice feathers is on the actual branch itself. That's because, as you look further on, like chimps and mice, they don't have feathers, obviously. So this trait was derived after it branched, essentially, is what that sort of means on your cladogram there. Okay. And so you'll have to answer some questions on cladograms. And then you'll go into dichotomous keys, okay? And a dichotomous key is di meaning two, basically a two-choice sort of naming thing, all right? And so as you look at a dichotomous key, or two-choice option is kind of what it translates to, okay? Two statements. A dichotomous key is it's sort of a system for identifying unknown things. It says the identification of biological organisms can be greatly simplified using tools such as dichotomous keys, a set of written choices, basically two choices, that leads you to the name of an organism or trying to identify something. We use these a lot in the field to identify unknown things. Dichotomous keys are really handy. Your optometrist uses a similar process. You think about going to the eye doctor. What do? They ask you which is clear, one or two, and then they make an adjustment. And they ask you again, which is clearer, one or two, right? And so they do the same process when you go to the eye doctor. They give you either or choices, and eventually, based on those either or choices, you get narrowed down to what you're actually looking at. And so as you look at this first dichotomous key, these are just yes or no questions. Does it have dry skin? Yes, then you move to hair. Does it have hair? No. Okay, dry skin without hair, lizard. Okay. Does it have dry skin? No. Okay, it's a salamander. Okay. So on and so forth. And so you can eventually, by asking either or questions, figure out what you're working with. Now, this is obviously very general. This is just giving you a kind of a quick example of what that looks like. This is a dichotomous key over these little fictitious characters you're going to answer questions about. And so put your answers in this table down here. All right. So the first one says so let's look at A. Has a green colored body. If it does, go to number 2. If it has a purple colored body, you go to number 4. And so eventually, if you keep answering these either or questions, you'll eventually get to sort of a dead end where it actually tells you what it is. And so in this case, has a green colored body. I know it looks kind of like a light blue, but that is green. So I would say yes. So it says go to 2. Has 4 legs. Yes. Okay, we're going to go to 3. Has has a tail. Does it have a tail? No, it does not. Okay, so it does not have a tail, so it's this one right here. Okay, Dirus magnus. All right, and so you just keep looking at the either or options until you figure out what you have. Okay, again, these are dichotomous keys. Then you have one over leaves. The only thing that's going to be different down here is you need to mark down your choices. Okay, I did the first one for you, so I look at leaf A. Leaf A says, or for the first one, the first choice in your dichotomous key is leaf has a smooth outline or leaf has a jagged outline. I would say these are more jagged. This is more smooth. So we would say leaf has a smooth outline, go to 2. But my first choice I picked was 1A. So I'm going to mark in 1A and say that was the choice I picked. Then it says go to 2. So I'm going to go to 2. Leaf about the same length as width. As we look, the leaf is about the same length as width. I would say so. It's pretty similar. Down here, obviously it's not. It's much taller than it is wide. And so I would say this is about the same width and length. So I would say 2A is our choice, and that's it. So Sidonia is what we have here, okay? And so we wrote that in here, but then we also put a little X in 2A saying those were our choices. Once you've got through all 3 of those, you've essentially got what I need you to have for um, classification. You'll have gone through general information about taxonomy. You'll have gone through cladograms, which is basically a family tree of who's related to who and what characteristics they have in common and which ones they don't. And then lastly, how to identify unknown organisms using a dichotomous key. Once you've got all that and you've answered those questions, make sure you check the turn in or click the turn in button, submit that, and then just basically wait until Thursday and I'll open the quiz. Okay, and your quiz is going to be a lot of information off of here, um, looking at naming system. Um, you might have to answer who's most. I might give you looking at these two, maybe a set of animals, and then you get their classification. Have to figure out who's most related to who. But your quiz is going to be shorter than your last evolution test was. Okay, the evolution test was something like 30 points. This will be shorter, but this is what you're going to want to use in addition to your notes to be able to do well on the quiz. And you'll have the resource in front of you, so use that. Okay, if you want to save yourself a copy of this, feel free to do that. But I think this will make sure that you're in a good position. Okay, if you have questions, ask. Make sure that you look through the notes I'm going to post. It does talk about cladograms and as well as just general taxonomy information. Okay, and then make sure that you do your assignment and be ready for the quiz. If you do those things, you satisfied really what I need you to get done this week. Okay, we're going to be moving on to ecology after this. After we've talked about classification, move on to ecology and biomes and things like that. Okay, if you have not made your phylogenetic tree in your final project, make sure you do that. If you're good there, then you're right where you need to be. All right, have a good week, guys. Let me know if you have questions.